Hello and welcome to Let's Talk, a series of podcasts produced by the Hazel and Betty Ford Foundation on the issues that matter to us and the issues that we know matter to you too. Substance use prevention, research, treatment of addiction, recovery management, education, and advocacy. I'm your host, William Moyers, and today for the first time on Let's Talk, we have a first. We have an author that will be coming out with a new book through our Hazel and Publishing unit called Fragile Power. And the guest is the author, Dr. Paul Hokemeyer. Paul, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Fragile power, that sounds like an oxymoron. Tell me more.
Intentionally so. Well, the book talks about the fragility that's an underlying power. Typically when we think of people who live in the world in positions of extraordinary power, we think that they have all the answers. We think that they have the keys to the kingdom. My work as a clinician and as a researcher shows that there's another side to that there's a fragility, that there's a vulnerability that's deep underlying those power presentations.
Because as you and I talked off camera, the world sees these people one way and these people see themselves somewhere else. Tell us about that.
Sure. So the world, we're built to kind of project out to people, particularly celebrities. We think that they, again, have everything, have all the answers to the world. If you live with those identities, if you live in the skin of a celebrity, there's an enormous amount of vulnerability attached to it. It's hard to attach to authenticity. You lose authenticity really loses its meaning. So particularly people who are in recovery, one of the things that we try to do in working with this population is get them to a place of authenticity. If you're a celebrity who has lost touch with their authenticity, it's a different process. It's a harder process to get there.
Can celebrities recover?
Absolutely. Many of them do.
But yet they seem to talk about it in a way that is sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy around the fact that they're celebrities to begin with. That's why they're talking about it.
Well, there is all of that. And so I think that we tend to hear, unfortunately, we tend to hear a lot of the negative stories. We tend to hear when people relapse. We tend to hear when people die by suicide or by overdose. Celebrities, there are many celebrities who recover, and they're kind of quiet about it because, again, they've reestablished a connection to that authenticity and recognize that it's not about the veneer, it's not about the projection of this perfection, but it's about the vulnerability and the authenticity that comes through that.
We'll come back to that in a minute, but before that, tell me a little bit about your background. It's fascinating, actually, how you've used your own personal and professional experiences to write this book. Talk about that.
Well, it's a bit circuitous.
Is it always?
If it has meaning,
True.
it tends to be. And it took a while for me to really find my calling as a clinician and as a researcher. I started my career in a very traditional route. I was an economics major in college. But fascinated by the power inherent in money. Economics studies markets and how money moves markets. And then I became a lawyer, and I was a bankruptcy lawyer, and so I knew that there was something destructive inherent in the power of money, and I became a bankruptcy lawyer, and then I decided that was not for me either. I went into the realm of philanthropy and was doing environmental work, working with ultra-high net worth people, and seeing again how this objectification was occurring around this population, and how people were very destructive. Then I decided to, I was living in Amsterdam actually, working for Greenpeace International, and September 11th happened. And as a white privileged male growing up in America, the security in my world had been guaranteed.
Interesting.
Until on that day it wasn't. And I had an existential crisis and moved back to America and really decided to create meaning and purpose in my life. And I thought that, well, I thought it would be a thing. I thought that it would be like creating an internet property or designing a pair of shoes or something. And I realized that it wasn't really a thing at all, that it was this process of self-discovery, and decided to go back to school and did a master's degree in clinical psychology with a focus on family systems, because I am a family therapist. And then again, realizing that the field of mental health, we've done an extraordinary job of working in the realm of cultural competency on the powerless side of the spectrum. If you think about the robust clinical formulations that are out there, feminist theory, LGBT work, the notions of minority stress, those look at those human beings in their positions of powerlessness in society. Money, wealth, celebrity give people enormous power. And that power, as we know, as we know from working in this field, is often used very destructively. And sort of working in that power dynamic to help bring a reparative experience to that patient, to that human being, to that family, to that couple, you have to have a deep understanding of what it's like to live in their skin. And that's what I hope that I've done through this book, to reveal the humanness that lives underneath of all these labels that we assign to people.
Who should read it?
Everybody.
Because the more the merrier.
Well, because I think we all struggle, particularly now in this day and age, of feeling ungrounded and unsafe.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're living in this narrative of division, we're living in this narrative of betrayal, and that makes us lose our core and our safety. And we think that if I just had that, if I just had a new watch, if I just had a new pair of shoes, that I would feel safe and secure. And these people, the people that I've worked with, have more than I could have ever imagined in my life, and still suffered from that vulnerability and that sense of disconnection. And we had to engage, and the book talks about in great detail my struggles with this population and the work that we needed to do to give them a sense of grounding with all the accoutrements of their success taken away.
And yet you don't just want people who like that to read this book. I mean, would you expect that clinicians or therapists who are working with this population would read it as well? Or would you like just anybody to read the book?
Well, there are different reasons to read the book.
Yes, tell me more.
So if you're struggling, feeling insecure and unsafe and lost in the world, you should read the book. Because the book will give you a roadmap. It'll tell you how to find connection, how to find meaning. If you're a person who lives in one of these identities, if you're a celebrity, if you're the top 10%, you should read the book, because then you'll realize that you're not alone in your struggles, and that there is a way that you can kind of get through the destructive relationship that you have with power. If you're a clinician, you should definitely read this book, because our field needs clinicians who have a deep understanding of this work and who can work in that power dynamic that occurs with the patients. The patients that I work with present with huge egos, very, very boisterous, very big people. And so the capacity to hold that enormity without getting seduced by it, without getting sucked into it, without joining in that pathology requires a very distinct set of clinical skills and personal traits.
And yet, there is a place for ego in recovery. I remember when my mentor in recovery, when I cried out to him and said, "Is there any place for ego in recovery?" And he said, "Yes, William, but only if it's teachable." And I've held on to that for 25 years. People who have prominence or success or have money, oftentimes it's their ego that helps them to get there. So how do they hold on to their ego even when they're broken? How do they hold on to their ego when they heal?
You shift. It's a shifting. I don't really like, when patients come to me all the time and they say, "Dr. Paul, get rid of my anxiety, get rid of my addiction, get rid of, my wife," actually. And so I'm always like, let's slow down a little bit. Let's figure out what all of this is about. It's our ego which causes us to get sober, because we are sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so it's that ego which is our life force, which wants us to have a life of integrity.
Because we still matter.
We still matter. And we still want to be seen and heard as a human being, as opposed to a label.
Was it hard to write the book?
It took a long time.
How long?
Well, I've been doing the research for 10 years. I've been in the field for 15 years. The book has gone through several iterations. Actually, I'm very happy that it's at Hazelden, because it's a place that honors the clinical integrity, that honors the patient population that I serve, that recognizes the need to approach this work with integrity and dignity. Some of the other publishers that were interested in the work were really, they wanted something a little more salacious, and you can't, this is about authenticity, this is about connection, this is about finding a place of dignity in the world, regardless of what label you present to the world in.
And that's possible even in this day and age?
Absolutely.
Is it harder than it used to be, or has it always been hard?
It's always been hard.
Yeah.
It will always continue to be hard. I think that we are living in a particular inflection point right now where when we look around us, it seems like vitriol and hatred are being rewarded. So I think that's difficult. That message that we're absorbing in our psyche is one of reward. I keep reminding myself that it's a long narrative and it continues to unfold. And I think that we are learning some critical lessons right now at a point in time where people are getting tired of the vitriol. They're tired. You turn on the news and it's like, you're hearing the things that we're hearing about are just, I have to shut it down sometimes because it's too much for my psyche. But I do think that we're reaching a saturation point. And look, human beings are incredibly adaptive. I would never do this work if I didn't think that people can change. People can change all the time. We know now from science, neuroplasticity, personalities change. Maybe a little harder, it may take longer time for some personalities, but there is change in there. I'm actually I'm more hopeful now for the future than I've been in a long time.
Really?
I am.
We only have a couple of minutes left. I'm interested more in you sharing the relationship with Hazel and Betty Ford. You know, a lot of people don't know that we're a publisher, one of the largest publishers of such material in the world outside of the federal government. We have a long history of publishing. Did you know much about our publishing before?
I did. I had always had my eye on you guys because there was always that integrity, and there was a heart and there was a soul in the work. Yes. So that you do the work as a part of the mission of the organization. And again, when I was talking to you guys when we were negotiating the book, where it would be placed, the message that I heard was, we really want to give this a home where it has a place of integrity and authenticity and dignity. And we want to make an impact. We want to advance the field as opposed to just selling out the book.
Well, we're glad that you have brought your knowledge, your expertise, your passion, your ability to write to home to Hazel and Betty Ford. The book is Fragile Power, Why Having Enough is Never Enough. It will be published by Hazel and Betty Ford in October of 2019. Dr. Paul Hokemeyer, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes. And on behalf of our executive producer, Lisa Stangl, I'm your host, William Moyers. Thank you for joining us for another edition of Let's Talk, a series of podcasts on the issues that matter to you and matter to us. We'll see you again.